Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're getting into some pretty heavy material, looking at excerpts from Stephen Jenkinson's book, Die Wise, a manifesto for sanity and soul.
Yeah, it's definitely not light reading. Jenkinson isn't really offering comfort here. It's more of a very sharp critique of how we, especially North America, handle death and dying.
Right, he uses all sorts of things, reflections, stories, some really challenging arguments to kind of push back against the way we usually approach it.
Exactly. And what we want to do in this deep dive is really get into his main arguments. Why does he say dying wisely is just such hard work for us right now?
What is it about our culture that makes it so difficult?
hmm
And maybe what would it even look like to approach dying and grief too, differently? Maybe in a way that's, I don't know, more grounded.
Yeah, perhaps more ancient even. It's the kind of stuff that really makes you question your assumptions, things you probably just took for granted.
Definitely. So yeah, let's dive in. He starts by saying we're pretty much ill-equipped for this fundamental thing.
hmm The core argument, right at the start, is that dying wisely is immense hard labor. He says it's because we live in a time and place that's, well, death-phobic and grief-illiterate.
Death-phobic and grief-illiterate. That's quite a charge. So dying well is just a sedated rumor. Why does he put it so starkly? What makes it so tough today?
Well, he points to a few key things. One is our language, what he calls addled language. The words we use, or maybe the words we don't use when we talk about death.
Like euphemisms,
Right.
dancing around the subject.
Exactly, or how we describe decline.
Mhm.
Then there are our assumptions about trauma, like we just assume that knowing you're dying must be traumatic, so we try to shield people from it.
And he also says we tend to boil it all down to the physical, doesn't he? Like dying is only about the body breaking down.
Precisely, ignoring the human, the spiritual, the cultural side of it all. And he says we don't really question our common sense about it much.
We just accept how things are done.
Pretty much. And maybe the deepest layer is what he calls a withered, mythic understanding. We've lost the big stories, the cultural context that might have helped earlier people understand life and death as part of a whole.
Hmm. Withered mythic understanding.
Yeah.
What does that actually mean for someone dying today? How does not having those stories affect them?
Well, Jenkinson might say it means we end up seeing dying as like this isolated personal failure instead of seeing it as part of a cycle connecting us to ancestors, to the earth, to something bigger than just us.
So without that frame, it just becomes terrifying, just to decline.
Yeah, a kind of void. And he also points out this cultural habit we have. When things get tough, when something's falling apart, what do?
We'll try harder.
We double down. We try harder at the very thing that caused the problem. So with dying, we try to fix it, control it, fight it even harder, instead of maybe learning how to be with it.
That makes sense. He shares from his own work, right? Saying most people he worked with didn't really want to die, well or wisely. They just didn't want to die, period.
Which is understandable, of course. But it led him to teach dying-centered care, which he says was like a totally new idea at the time.
Wow. That really says something about where the focus usually is.
Mm-hmm. And that leads straight into this other big idea he tackles, the whole if you can, you should mentality.
Oh, right. The cobalt example he uses there is pretty stark, talking about how people remembered relatives coming back from treatments, physically ravaged.
Yeah, scarred and scared by what the technology could do, whether it actually helped the person live well or not. And this if you can, you should idea gets applied really intensely to slowing down dying.
It's just baked into medical tech and services, isn't it? The source material makes you ask, who's really being served here? Who's consuming and who's being consumed? When we just keep applying tech relentlessly, especially when someone is clearly slowly dying.
Exactly. And he talks about palliative care too, which, most people see as the kindest approach.
And he does acknowledge its value, right?
Mhm.
For pain and symptom management. The soap of palliative care, he calls it.
Yes, he acknowledges that. But he also raises a concern. He suggests that even palliative care, with the best intentions, can sometimes end up reinforcing the idea that dying is mainly a medical problem to be managed.
By focusing so much on the body, the disease.
Perhaps. It might unintentionally sideline the deeper human experience of it. Looking bigger picture, Jenkinson suggests that maybe over the last few decades, we've kind of tamed the old nightmare of sudden, messy death.
Okay.
But what we've replaced it with, he argues, is this kind of purgatory, extended dying. People live longer, technically, but nobody, not the dying person, not the family really knows how to have a dying person around. We've lost the script, the skills.
That lack of knowing how.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like that connects directly to his chapter on the tyrant Hope. That title really grabs you.
It does, because hope, I mean, we usually think of hope as purely good,
Yeah.
a virtue. But Jenkinson calls it a siren song, even a tower of sand where dying people often end up living.
And preserving hope is often like goal number one in care plans.
Totally. But he asks this really sharp question: what does it do to you to be hopeful that way? Meaning, clinging to hope for a cure or just more time when dying is actually happening.
It can stop you from facing reality, from knowing what you deep down probably already know.
That's his argument. It prevents knowing. And he connects this to something he calls word voodoo.
Word voodoo. What's that?
It's that unspoken belief, that fear, that just saying the word dying or talking about it openly might somehow make it happen or make it happen faster.
So it leads to silence, avoidance.
Exactly. And then it's often way too late for anyone, the person dying, the family, to actually learn how to do this difficult work of dying.
So instead of that kind of hope, he argues for knowing.
He says dying really begins when you see your own death, not just intellectually accept mortality, but actually see it coming for you. And he stresses this isn't automatic, it's hard work.
And it's news because you didn't know it that way before. It's different from just being afraid of death.
Right. It's a specific knowledge, not just abstract fear. He tells this amazing story about asking an audience, people who worked with the dying, to vote on the statement. Everyone knows they are going to die. Almost nothing could raise their hand. There was this huge reluctance, this inability to just affirm that simple, seemingly obvious fact, which shows, that knowing isn't simple at all.
Wow. Intellectually, yes.
Yeah.
But actually knowing it in your bones, that's different. So what happens when you do achieve that knowing?
He says it can change everything. Seeing your dying changes how you see your life. It changes your I, as he puts it, reframes your whole perspective.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. He also really challenges how our culture looks at suffering and grief.
Yeah, this is another really counterintuitive part. Normally, we see suffering as what? Something bad that happens to us.
Right, an affliction. Something to get rid of. Fix it, numb it, avoid it.
But Jenkinson flips that. He suggests suffering could actually be a skill, something we need to learn, maybe even be taught, something to defend.
A skill?
Yeah.
That's unexpected. It's definitely not listed on any care plan goals I've ever seen.
Exactly. But he argues it's a vital human ability. It's what allows us to actually engage with the hard stuff, with reality, including dying.
And he says something similar about grief, doesn't he? It's not just a feeling inside.
Right, not just a messy knot of emotions. He says grief is something you do. It's an ability, the ability to know the hard truths about life, about loss, about limits, and to keep living as if they are true.
That's powerful, doing grief rather than just feeling it.
And he links the inability to do these things to suffer well, to grieve well, to some of our modern problems. Like depression might sometimes be the result of not being able to be sad when it's actually time to be sad.
So sadness needs to be taught. Heartbreak isn't just a diagnosis, it's a skill.
That's his provocative take. He even tells this story about a sad school, literally, a place where men were learning how to access and express sadness, which just highlights how much we don't teach these things generally.
It really does. Which kind of leads into another thing we obsess over, quality of life, especially near the end.
Oh, yeah. He argues this focus is driven by an adolescent creed, he calls it. This belief in health, wholeness, independence above all else.
So success, even in dying, gets measured by how well you resist getting weaker or needing help.
Pretty much. Resisting diminishment. And he's really critical of applying this measure so rigidly at the end of life. He says it's selling competence as the solution, but it ignores the reality of dying. He calls it a methadone approach, just managing the withdrawal from competence.
That image of the dying man measuring his life by whether he could still climb the stairs to the bathroom alone.
Yeah.
That was just brutal.
It really captures it, doesn't it? How this focus on doing makes basic human needs feel like failures, this crushing sense of regression when competence fades.
And he connects this whole addiction to competence and comfort to things like medically assisted dying debates, right?
Yeah. He suggests that things like terminal sedation or people experiencing profound mental anguish, that deep heartbrokenness at the end, maybe these aren't just individual issues.
But symptoms. Symptoms of a culture that can't handle decline, can't make space for things it hasn't, approved or found a tidy solution for.
That's the implication, that these are maybe unforeseen consequences of our success at buying more time without figuring out what to actually do with that time when life gets really hard and messy.
Okay, this next idea feels even bigger, more foundational maybe. This concept of cultural homelessness and how we relate to the dead.
Yes, he talks about a kind of deep cultural trauma, a loss of home, and he means more than just a house. He means connection to ancestry, to a specific place, and really importantly, to the dead.
He uses the Genesis story, the exile from the garden, in a really interesting way here.
He does. He interprets it not just as losing paradise or eternal life, but as a kind of origin story for a specifically Western way of being mortal. One defined by being uprooted, fragile, and this is key, abandoning the dead.
Abandoning the dead, how so?
He argues that in our culture, the dead are mostly treated as, well, gone, done, hypothetical, not really our business anymore. We don't feel much obligation or ongoing connection. They're just the dead, generically, not our dead.
That anecdote about the cemeteries up north really brought that home for me. The difference between the maintained church plots and that forgotten patch where the Hudson Bay Company men were buried.
Described simply as they, unclaimed, unknown by their descendants. That word they just captures the disconnect, the abandonment, so starkly.
And he thinks this loss of home, of connection to our dead, contributes to that feeling some dying people have, that they're coming from nowhere, lacking roofs for their final journey.
That seems to be his suggestion, that it leaves people feeling profoundly unmoored at a time when rootedness might be needed most.
So let's circle back to where we started. Dying is work.
Exactly. He keeps emphasizing that. It's not passive. It's an active thing, something being done somewhere.
So if it's work being done, what do the people doing that work, the dying, actually need from the rest of us?
Well, he suggests it's not just cheerfulness or easy answers, or telling them they're being inspiring teachers.
He pushes back on that idea, right? That dying people are automatically teachers.
Yeah, he says while it's well-intentioned, often dying people are just struggling. They're caught in the currents of our death-avoiding culture. Their main job is their own dying, not teaching us.
So what do they need?
He says they need the rest of us to actually know something real, something enduring and useful about what dying is and what it asks of everyone. And, crucially, to be able to act on that wisdom.
And for us, the ones alongside them, being a witness is hard work too.
Incredibly hard. It means being willing to, in some sense, feel that dying in our own bones, to stay present, be a faithful witness, without trying to fix it or run away.
That story about the home visit where the wife says, don't use the D word.
Yeah, perfect example of that word voodoo again. That paralysis around just naming what's happening, seeing it clearly.
And the other story, the son asking his dying mother, tell me what it's like. And she just couldn't.
Right. He uses that to show how our language, our whole culture, lacks the tools. We don't have the words, the concepts, to really grasp or share that experience because we haven't done the collective work of trying to understand it.
Okay, so finally, he presents maybe the most radical idea of all, thinking about dying, not just as loss, but as justice or service.
Yeah, that one really flips the script. Instead of seeing death as the ultimate insult, the final violation of our autonomy.
The last violation of our personal volition, as he puts it.
Right. Instead of that, could it be seen as a kind of payment, just payment toward the debt we owe to what gave us life?
And he connects that to our ecological impact, the debt we owe the earth.
He draws that parallel. Our way of living takes so much from the planet, from the future. Maybe dying, understood differently, could be a way of acknowledging that debt, paying some small part back.
It's a challenging thought. What's the potential impact of seeing it that way?
Well, Jenkinson suggests that if dying could be understood not just as personal loss, but as having this larger meaning, justice, maybe mercy, maybe compassion, it could transform it.
From just an ending into an initiation.
Initiation, yeah, into a world-loving, community-serving love of life. It gives dying itself a profound purpose beyond just the individual fading away.
Wow. Okay. This has been a lot to take in. This deep dive into Jenkinson definitely forces you to look at things differently.
It really does. It highlights how culturally we seem pretty unprepared, maybe even determined not to face death wisely, always prioritizing control, comfort.
Over actually knowing, over working with mortality, over developing those harder skills, like real suffering and grieving.
Exactly. But then there are these alternative ideas he puts forward. Suffering and grief as skills we need, the importance of truly knowing you're dying, understanding the cultural roots of why we avoid it, how we've abandoned our dead.
And that final, really provocative idea of dying as maybe, possibly, an act of service.
Yeah. So, wrapping up, thinking about all this, even the really difficult parts, what does it mean for you, listening right now? How might chewing on these ideas change how you live day to day?
Or how you are with the people you love, the living ones and maybe those who are approaching death or even those who have already died.
Jenkinson leaves us with this thought that learning to die wisely isn't something you put off, it's practice. Something you can do in all the mundane corners of daily life.
Right now, he says there's nothing to wait for. So the question is, what might that practice actually look like for you starting today?